Hey, my name is Elacia. I am a mother, a wife, an entrepreneur, and a ministry leader. And I am creating this space and this series called Unequally Yoked to dive into my story, to share my testimony, and express some of the things that I endure while being married to an unbeliever. Some of the challenges I faced, some of the things that I had to learn, and how I was able to live victoriously, although my husband is not fully converted yet. And so, talking about my story, as I keep thinking about it and I go over like the things that I've written down, and I think about some of the areas that I've experienced throughout my marriage, and I'm just like, wow, there's a group of people, not just women, but there's also men who are married to unbelieving wives who have endured similar trials that I have. And if I can be a help, if I can be, a branch to reach, and to encourage, I absolutely am interested in doing that. And so this is why we're here. This is an open forum. So I do invite for those to come in. If you have comments, if anything resonates with you, I do invite you to put a comment in the comment chat, for you to message me privately. If you would like to share your story, email me. I'll link my email so that, stories can be sent over. But I just think that it is the time and the hour where I believe that God is restoring marriages, and He restored mine, and He's still yet working on my marriage. And I wanted to just share, to come on and, to be a help and an encouragement for those who are going through the same things I'm experiencing. So I will start off by answering the question, why did you marry an unbeliever? And the answer is, when I first met my husband, we were both still in the world. So I had been saved. I had been to church and lived a, I would say, religious life of going to church on Sunday, Bible studies, and, reading the scriptures at home. But I wasn't fully sold out, I would say. And so before I fully came into the knowledge of who Jesus was and what that meant to me and the scriptures and all of the things, I was where my husband was. I was in my flesh. I was very carnal and worldly. I was still partying and doing all of the worldly things. And it wasn't until, I just kept going and reading the word that it began to change me. It literally started to change my desires. It started to change my appetite. It started to change, my mindset. I was gradually changing because of my seat. For my husband, he was going to church solely because I would go. And the first church my husband and I ended up at, we were at a church where my family were heavily a part of. And, he's a gentleman. He's a great guy. And so, he got familiar with my family. He got familiar with the things that I like. And that's what we normally do, when we first enter into relationships. We get to know about the person, get to learn about them, what they like and don't like, and there are some things that we do in order to, I guess, I wouldn't say please. I was just going to use the word please. We do things to please them, or go along to get along type of thing. And so, he had no reservations to going to church. And we would go very faithfully every Sunday. And even like with church functions, when they would have events and stuff, we were there. It was really, really nice. What kind of was the beginning of his falling away was, as we were progressing in this ministry, I believe every deacon of the church was married. They were known to be married, as well as the pastor. And my husband, he told me that they had bumped into each other because my husband used to work in the city. And so when they bumped into each other, they chatted for a bit. And then at the end, they exchanged numbers, I was like, oh, wow, that's great. He told me about it. So I'm like, yes, he's getting to know, people in the church are going to steer him the right way. This is awesome. I was so excited. And then one evening we got a text message. He got a text message rather, but I answered it, of this deacon in particular that sent him a collage with the notion of them getting together to go meet up with some women. Yeah. So needless to say, our flabbers were gasted. Okay. And so that steered him, totally the opposite way, and then, we had a conversation initially about our beliefs, and I asked him, what do you believe in? And he said, well, he does have some roots. His family some of his family are Christian. And then he said he doesn't mind it, but what he's learned from when he's back home in this country, he's from West Africa. He said that they largely open up these churches in order to form them into businesses, even though we know that the church is meant to lead people to Christ. But what he witnessed and experienced was people in Africa specifically who would raise up churches as a business so that they can live this lavish lifestyle, right? And so it was like when he met me, he was, willing to try it here in the Western country, but he always had that experience in the back of his mind. And so he also stated that he had roots in Muslim culture, but mostly like what his father followed and some of his family members and stuff. But he wasn't with it because in those times and what he's experienced where they would kill people if they wasn't believers of their God. And he said he wasn't with that either. So when I asked him, he said, "Oh, I'm just neutral." That's what he would say. But he wasn't opposed to trying and coming. And so, cool. So after this whole ordeal, I believe things started brewing even more of what he was witnessing. And so, we ended up at another church, and, we actually went through a few churches before we ended up at a ministry that was really heavy in deliverance and prophetic and teachings and healing and all of those things. And so then it just seemed like as I was progressing, the more he was falling away, because when we were at the initial church, I don't think we ever had any issues with like the music, the sound, or things being too loud or too long. And I feel like they would kind of carry on with service, but we would sit there and we would just, flow with it. But when I got to this deliverance ministry, he would start getting annoyed and agitated with the sound of the noise. Now, back then, I didn't realize that it was, the things that he was experiencing that was being agitated. And also something that was trying to discourage me, because when he started to fall off, I'm like, oh God, like I thought that we were, on this journey of, getting to know more about Christ and being transformed and reformed and conformed to Christ and all of these things. And now it just seems like I'm just doing these things by myself. Now, regardless of that happening, regardless of me seeing my husband falling away, I was a bit discouraged, but I was so hungry for Jesus at this time. I was 21. So 2011, 12, and 13, I would find myself in church by myself. I would find myself in prayer by myself. I would find myself in all of these other services alone. And I don't think I fully understood it, but I did remember hearing the teachings about, there are two paths. There's a narrow path and there is the wide path that leads to destruction. And the narrow path is the one that few find. And so I did understand that my journey was my journey. And it wasn't predicated upon my husband or, our marriage or whatever the case may be. It was predicated upon my seek, my desire, my hunger, my thirst. And God was drawing me. And so I would still go. I would take the kids and, we would still be in church. And the more that God progressed me and raised me up, it seemed like the more hell we would experience in our marriage. And again, I didn't fully understand what was happening, because between 2011, when I first met him, and 2014, we were not married yet. We were just dating, and we did end up having a baby in 2012 outside of marriage. We began to have a discussion about marriage at the end of 2014, where the Lord was developing me. So now I had a conviction about not being unequally yoked. And the crazy thing was, I don't think I realized unequally yoked meant what the Bible teaches about two people not having the same beliefs. I thought it meant that if I'm going to be equal with God, that I have to align with God. So being equally yoked to me meant that we had to be married. And so then we would be equal. I guess that's how I thought it. And then I would have those conversations with my husband. And initially, he said to me, some people can be together for X amount of years and they would never be married, but they'll be in love. We don't have to get married. It's just a piece of paper. And I'm like, sir, absolutely not. And so when I began to go deeper with God and start having these conversations with my husband, well, he was my boyfriend at the time, he would get agitated. It was this big thing. And then I remember, I don't know what happened, but I remember we was kind of beefing. And so much so that the last time I asked him about marriage and the answer wasn't what I wanted, I packed up my stuff and I left. I did. Yes, I did. So I believe in 2014 of August or September, I left. And I gave him an ultimatum, and I basically told him, if we aren't getting married, then there's no reason for me to be here. I'm not going to behave as a wife but not have the covenant as a wife. I'm not going to be here and pretend to be your wife, without the papers. And so, that was that. I left. The first month rolled around, I was gone. The second month, the third month, he got real nasty. He got really upset because when I left, his mind was saying, she's crazy. She is nuts. What does she mean that she's leaving me? We have a son together. We've built a relationship and a bond together. She has to be nuts. Who's talking to this woman? He called my mom. He was asking her, what's going on with your daughter? He thought I was literally losing my mind. And all the while, I was in a place where I really wanted to please God. And because the word, I would just be consuming so much of the word. It was working on me. You know what I'm saying? So that's really what it was. And so, at first he got a little nasty and, he was being funny with me. And then he was like, it is what it is. He assumed that I would just come right back. But then the fourth month rolled around. Then the fifth month rolled around and we weren't having any conversations about being together. Only, I have this son with me, so I need some diapers, I need some milk, I need a ride, things of that nature. And then the sixth, I'll also add that between the seventh month when I was gone up until the time me and my husband had a conversation about getting married, I remember having a conversation with God because when I noticed, 4 and 5 months had passed, 6 months had passed, and he didn't come chasing after your girl, and I'm like, I don't know what he waiting on. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, what's the hold up? When I noticed he wasn't coming, I said, God, I wasn't going to try to press it. I was not going to try to force my way into his heart. I wasn't going to force this man to marry me. I already, explained to him exactly what I wanted, what my desires were. And if he wasn't ready, I was acceptant of it. And I was like, Lord, if I'm going to be a single mom and, if we never got together again, I would be okay. And I remember maybe a week or two later in the month of February of 2015, that's when we had a conversation where we were both mature. We both laid out our feelings and our desires. And we were planning our wedding for Valentine's Day of 2015. So this is what the beginning of my marriage looked like, from me dating my husband, him being a non-believer, but me having hope that he would be converted, because I truly believed, and even still, that if God worked on me, God was going to work on him. And the Bible does say that the sanctified wife sanctifies the husband. So it may take him longer, but I still believe and I still have hope. So continue to journey with me as I share more of my story. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Chat with me if you have a story to share. I would love to.